Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew, Keith Johnson.
What's up, y'all?
And Veronica Dashel.
Hi.
And we're back.
Yay.
And we're going to be talking about the Star Trek What Ifs Part 2 this week, continuing on from last week. But first, we've got a bit of Star Trek news. Now, we've been talking for literally years about this Khan series, which originally was going to be a mini series, and then it was Nicholas Meyer himself announced that it was going to be an audio series, and it's been really quiet for a while. And then all of a sudden, there was an announcement today that production has wrapped on Star Trek Khan, the franchise's first scripted audio drama miniseries based on a story by Nicholas Meyer, with all 9 episodes written by Kristen Beyer and David Mack. It was announced today at IGN Fan Fest, and that Naveen Andrews, who we all know from Lost, is playing Khan Noonien Singh, and Ren Schmidt, who we all know from For All Mankind, is playing Marlon McGivers. And that's an inside joke because I harassed Keith for months about
watching that.
What do you think of the news?
I think it's pretty cool. I've always wanted to know what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much you can cover with that. Does she regret going with Khan?
Right.
I've always wondered how the rest of the people treat her, because he said she's a pure woman, but she's not an augment.
Right.
And there's that one lady with that kind of seductive look. You remember on the ship when they were doing those crazy calisthenics, and there's this one lady with the brunette hair, and he kind of claps on the shoulder. She gives him that look. And I just always envisioned she'd probably like try to kill Marla as soon as they get on the planet. There's so much when people try to overthrow Khan because they're like, you led us to this failure at the hands of a puny human. It's completely unexplored territory for me.
Yeah. Well, there was a book by Greg Cox a while back.
Okay.
It's probably decades back at this point, called Terrain in Hell. That was about Khan's time on SETI Alpha 5. But David Mack, who is also a Star Trek novelist, has been sort of posting about this, and he and Kirsten Byers, who I'm glad to see Kirsten Beyer back because I haven't heard about her in a while, wrote all the episodes based on Nicholas Meyer's story. But he confirmed in his comments about the miniseries that it's not based on the book. He said he had suggested it and got overruled. But there were several people who asked him, I mean, the first question a nerd's going to ask is it based on the original Khan who had the 1990s eugenics war, or the new Khan in the 2020s? And he said it's a direct follow-up to the 1967 episode Space Seed.
That's good.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, it's academic, I guess, to like the story, unless he's making a lot of cultural references. Which I also don't really want Khan talking about like 90s movies and things, but... But I don't know. To me, it matters. So I'm glad
I agree.
See that.
I agree. There's so much to be mined about great conquerors who basically fall. Napoleon was sent to Elba Island, for example.
Right.
Came back, did it again. Then they sent him away, and they kept him there for the rest of his life. And there's been plays and stuff written about what does a great conqueror like that do when they're just nobody anymore. They're just small. What do they do? So I'm very interested to see what happened to Khan during that time.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the journey because, I mean, we've talked about before, Khan was a more sympathetic character in Space Seed, still had a dark streak to him, for sure. He tried to take over the Enterprise and tried to kill Captain Kirk. That's not good. But he wasn't the megalomaniacal like guy with a doomsday weapon who was in Wrath of Khan. And so I'm interested to see what that journey is going to be like. What do you think of the casting of Naveen Andrews?
I think that's good. He's a good actor, and it's all audio, right? So it's so it's just all voice acting. He's very good at it, so I think that he'll be very good.
He looks the part too, though. He can play Khan in live action. Veronica, what do you think about Margot from For All Mankind appearing in it?
I'm excited about it. I like that actress a lot. I don't remember Space Seed.
I know you don't.
So I don't remember the character she's playing at all.
Yeah. She also was a redhead.
Oh.
I mean, there's probably more she brings to the part than that. It's an audio series. That's the least important thing. But she's a good actress. I think that's a real solid casting for, I mean, any production, but much less this one in particular. I think that's great casting.
Veronica, this will probably ring a bell. She played Tony DeMira's mother on Days of Our Lives soap opera.
Nope.
In the 80s.
When I was an infant? Or
Sure.
potentially not even born.
Did she? I don't
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, she's actually on the soap opera. Yeah. So
okay.
she was on the same soap opera with the evil Stefano Demira, who was played by Jennifer Aniston. No, another guy. Jennifer Aniston's father was on the same soap opera, Victor Kiriakis.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think the actress was that old. I didn't think she was playing anything 40 years ago, but I don't have that.
This is the original Marla, not the.
Oh, I got you. I thought you were
Yeah.
talking about the lady
no,
from For
yeah.
All Mankind, and I was like, she's like 35 or something.
That's great.
I don't
Well,
want to contradict you here, but
you did say which card are we talking about? There is some
True.
time travel.
we're already confusing ourselves. All right. Do we have some This Week in Trek this week?
Yeah, this is a few things I think. There was this is out to Matt Sweatman. I think it's Matt Sweatman. On the 23rd of February, 1967, was the NBC network premiere of an episode which ended with Kirk saying, "Disease, death, destruction. That's what war is about. That's why it's a thing to be avoided."
Right.
We are, of course, talking about A Taste of Armageddon.
Absolutely.
For my money, one of the best Star Trek episodes of the original series. I think it was Matt who doesn't really love that episode. I think we had
Blasphemy.
I know, right?
Yeah. I love that episode.
Me too.
And it's just great, like fun Star Trek. I love the bit where they try to go rescue Captain Kirk, and he's got the entire room at gunpoint when they come in. Like that's Captain Kirk.
That is such a great episode, and it's got the cool thing with the cool disruptors and the money saving disruptors. They don't have a beam, but it's still it's a great, and it's classic Trek because the whole point of it is in real world. Do you want to stop fighting? I mean, at the end of the day, the guy is like, "Look, we're a killer species," And then he brings up Kirk, who has that really weird rule that I hope the Starfleet still doesn't have, where you can call up to the ship and tell the chief engineer, "Look, if you don't hear from me like in 20 minutes, blow up the entire planet." And I hope that doesn't still exist at Starfleet.
We have that rule at our house.
Such a good one. Then 1968, 1 year later, premiered. I brought this up because it's very interesting. I mentioned this many times. It's actually possibly one of the most disappointing Star Trek episodes for me in terms of promise and fulfillment. And this is By Any Other Name.
Okay.
That is, of course, the famous episode, Veronica. You might know this is the one, the famous "It's Green" from Scotty. And it's the one where the Kelvins are going to conquer the galaxy, and they conquer the Enterprise, turn around to go back to the Andromeda Galaxy. And by the end of the show, everybody makes friends and they go back home. It's got some of the most horrific things in Star Trek history. It's the one where they turn the young ensign into a cube, and they turn a young security guard into a cube. And then Rojan crushes one of them to show his power to Kirk, and then it turns out he killed the young lady. I mean, you got to think about this stuff in 1968. That's some intense stuff.
That's a little rough.
It's very rough. And the reason I always bring this show up is the first half is a phenomenal, exciting, dramatic episode about conquest and enemies. And then the second half, Kirk romances the woman. McCoy gives a guy uppers basically to get him hyper, and Scotty drinks the guy under the table. And I'm always like, those are two different episodes. They were mashed together.
You're right. It's a huge tonal shift, but I love that one. I think that's a lot of fun.
It's still a good one.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, another one. Oh, this is if anybody want to protest, send it to me. This is so real world. 27th of February, 1991 was the premiere of it's the final day of filming for the Next Generation episode, The Drumhead.
Oh,
which is one of my favorite for the original series. And Veronica, I don't know if you know what that one was. It's the one where they think there's a conspiracy in the Federation. There's an explosion in engineering. There's a Klingon on board the Enterprise who they find out is basically stealing information by literally encoding stuff in his blood because he has to take injections. And then they send in the great actress Gene Simmons. Remember, she was what was her name? Charles and Blake Olsen.
Nora Sadie.
Yeah, right. And she basically starts an investigation to what may be a problem with the Enterprise. It turns quick into this really strange witch hunt where everybody on the ship, especially Picard, is a suspect. And she's basically drawing up an enemies list. It's, again, classic Trek at its best.
We were talking about it just recently, and you pointed out, I mean, a great point in the episode where Worf is sort of on board with this thing, right?
Yes.
As it's going along until they start questioning him about Captain Picard, and it's like, hold on, like this has gone too far. Like Picard's on the enemies list now. I think it's a great relevant episode, though. It holds the test of time, I think.
Right. Two more real quick. And I said only three, but I got more. 28th of February, 1969. This is another one. It's just real world relevant. And I'm just going to say this. You have a society that's very rich and they exploit a group of people who are not as well off for the minerals that they have. And I'm just going to leave it right there. We're talking about real world things. But what we're talking about is the cloud minders.
Yeah,
the episode. Yeah, that's an episode where they had to go to mine Zenite. A mineral that was needed throughout the Federation, and it turns out that there's a group of people who live in caves called the troglodytes, which I think is weird. I always think it's weird when alien planets adopt words directly from our language. And you got these really sophisticated people, the Stratos city dwellers who live in the cloud, and they basically look down upon and exploit the cave dwellers. And then you find out that the gas supposedly is making all the cave dwellers basically have mental development issues. But if the people in the clouds had ever really cared to look, maybe they would have helped these people out instead of exploiting them. Again, classic Star Trek.
Oh yeah, yeah, and one of those stories that never gets old.
Right.
Like the premise just is evergreen, unfortunately.
Exactly. And then the absolute last one, and I only bring this up because of history. The 1st of March, 1968 was the premiere of. I'll never forget this one. Kirk gives a famous speech where he says, "We the people do hereby." He does the E Pluralista. This, of course, is the Omega Glory. The episode where they go down to the planet where the disease had evidently killed a bunch of people on this one starship. Captain Ron Tracy is down there. They found out it's yet another one of those money-saving parallel Earths where the communists, and the Yankees fought the battle. Communists won. Kirk finds the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, and everything's going to be okay at the end. Why do I bring this episode up? It is often cited as one of the worst episodes of the original series, believe it or not, by fans, but it is also one of like the 5 pilots that Gene Roddenberry wrote when he wrote the concept of Star Trek. And this was really close to being the premiere episode of Star Trek. The pilot, Gene Roddenberry wrote this one down. Instead, we got The Cage.
Salt Vampire.
No, the Salt Vampire wasn't the pilot.
Was
It
it?
was the first aired episode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. How they aired them, how they filmed them were crazy. That's it. But one really quick thing I want to mention. I guess we mentioned real quick. And Charles had posted this. I didn't know we lost Roberto Orsi this week.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, and that's sad. And I know that. I mean, the Kelvin films are contentious among fans, and they always have.
Absolutely.
But I mean, he passed away unfortunately at the age of 51, and I mean, for anybody that's too young. So yeah, certainly our condolences go out to his friends and family and fans.
Yeah.
It's just sad to see.
Yeah, really is.
Yep. All right. Well, before we get into What If Part 2, let's grab a couple of comments. Matt Sweatman commented, "I'll wear that scarlet letter."
That's the one.
In reference to our publicly shaming him for not liking A Taste of Armageddon. He also said, "I never knew Keith was a Days fan."
Yes, dude. I watched that thing for like 30 years.
Wow.
And he commented that Khan was a huge Spice Girls fan.
Oh, God.
I was.
Bill Lamont commented, he's sorry he's a little late. YouTube said we hadn't started. Well, I'm glad you found us and you made it in. And our bloody Tiger Blade 2002 says, "Hey, y'all."
Hi, Wayne.
And hey, and welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you here because we're going to pick up where we left off last week, talking about the what ifs of Star Trek, the roads not traveled and what might have happened. And Alan couldn't be here tonight, but he did. Don't peek, Veronica.
Oh,
he did send me
sorry.
the list of what ifs. She's already looking over my shoulder. But so the one we had sort of teased last week that we're going to pick up with this week was what if Denise Crosby and Marina Sirtis stayed in the roles which they were originally cast? And a lot of people know that they were originally inverted. They were looking at Marina Sirtis to play a character named, I believe the name was Macha Hernandez, who would be the security chief, and looking at Denise Crosby to play the ship's counselor. And how do you think that might have played out?
I have to say, and I like her a lot, but I will say, as I have seen Marina Sirtis in real life, I think she could have played a security guard. Because most people who see her on the show think of her as just really kind of shy and almost self-effacing and calm and almost ethereal Deanna Troi. But in real life, and this is not a criticism. Marina Sirtis is a pretty hard-nosed, sometimes aggressive, very opinionated, borderline rude person who had a whole other personality level she could have mined. I think she actually would have done a good security guard, security chief, if they'd written the role well, which Denise Crosby always said they didn't write well.
Yeah.
I think she would have done well. For some reason, I don't see Denise Crosby as a counselor so much, maybe because she started out playing Tarsha. I think I see Marina, the Marina I know she can be, playing a security chief more than I see Denise playing a counselor. But that may be biased on what I saw her do.
Yeah, probably so. I think the biggest difference, I think, in the portrayals to me would I think Denise Crosby might have played it sexier, the interplay with Riker, because that was a big part of the character that became Troy. Was it was sort of based off of Decker and Ilea from the motion picture, but they had that past. And I think that I mean, just from what we saw, I think that she might have played that a little bit differently than the way Marina did. I mean, I'm sure she would have, because obviously she's a very different performer.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I think Denise Crosby, my understanding is she left the show because she was not happy with the scripts that she was being given.
Right.
But I don't know that she would have been any happier with the scripts that Denise Crosby or that Marina Sirtis was being given in season 1.
That's true.
Because she may have already left. And the way it played out in real life, it worked out nicely, because you had the security chief leave, and then it was real easy to slot Worf in there. Right.
Yeah.
But if the counselor leaves, that's not as easy a transition. I mean, you could just make Worf the counselor, and I would be on board with that.
Boy.
No.
But
no.
I don't think it would have felt as natural as for him playing the security chief.
How can I help you?
Right.
Sit down.
Well, how do you think that might have gone? Would they have just added a new counselor? Might they have Geordi have become the counselor instead of the engineer? I mean, what?
I think they would have brought in someone new, kind of like when Crusher took a sabbatical in season 2.
Yeah,
as long as it was Diana Muldaur, I would be on board. I could see Diana Muldaur playing the ship's new counselor.
Me too. I could see that work. And that might have been better because ship's counselor, they wouldn't have tried to make her that weird McCoy clone for a bit.
They probably still would have done that.
Yeah.
But it'd be kind of nice to have Diana Muldaur sitting right next to Captain Picard, arguing with him.
Oh, yeah.
You'd think that that'd be a big difference, obviously, in the characters. Troy certainly had her role there, but she wasn't one to sort of argue with the captain.
Yeah.
That might have been an interesting way to play it. But Veronica, what do you think about Marina Sirtis playing the security chief?
I can definitely see it, and it would have made more sense if her character and Worf had gotten together at the end, if she had been the security chief, because it seems like they would have had more in common.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think Marina Sirtis would have been perfectly capable of playing the security chief. I think that would be interesting. Now, the name implies that she's of Latino descent, and obviously Marina Sirtis is not. I think she's of Greek by way of England. So my hope is that it wouldn't be like with a fake accent and stuff, like
oh gosh,
because she did have a fake accent on the show, but obviously it was the Beta Z accent that only she had. No other Beta Z ever had it.
Not even her mom.
Well, let's see what the listeners thought. Tigerblade 2002 says, I think Marina would have made a great security chief. Matt Sweatman commented, and Muldaur could have stuck around for longer as well. And that's true. You could have had Muldaur as a recurring thing on the show. Tigerblade 2002 says, Worf, I see your problem. Be gone. I think Worf would have been a fun counselor. And then Elaine Whiting Sweatman says they would have brought in someone new like they did when Gates left. Yep. And Matt Sweatman says, I'm picturing Marina in that scene with Data in The Naked Now. Yeah, I can picture that as well. Okay, we ready to move on to the next one? Do we want to keep picking numbers like we were doing last week?
8.
Oh my gosh. We already did the 8 thing.
Hey, one thing I was thinking about real quick when you said that about, what if the security thing hadn't changed? What it might have been interesting was if, say, Marina Sirtis had remained security chief, and maybe they didn't even have a counselor to focus on as much. It would have. I wonder if they would have developed Worf as a different character, as the first, as he would have been, because he was the assistant to the security chief. I guess he was assistant security chief. I wonder how the show would have been written if he was never written as the security chief, but was always working under. Like maybe you almost have like the security chief is more shipbound and Worf is the guy who goes on away missions more or something like that. It could be some dynamics there they could have written. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they still would have continued the trope of like the bad guy beats up Worf to show how bad they are. I don't think he would have gotten away from that unless he was the counselor. But yeah, it would be an interesting dynamic to have. I mean, really, you've got an extra person there. You don't need Worf and a security chief, right?
True.
But it would be interesting to see him sort of playing second fiddle to somebody and being subordinate to someone throughout the show. That would be an interesting dynamic to play off of.
And maybe feeling he's better fit for the job than that person.
That could be. Yeah. And until some old lady turns into a monster and beats him up. All right. Veronica, we going with the 8 thing again?
Sure.
All right. What if the EMH was modeled after Leonard McCoy instead of Louis Zimmerman?
Wow. Interesting.
Oh my goodness. That I don't feel like the character would have developed the way that he did because McCoy was very stuck in his ways.
Yeah, for me, if it means bringing back D. Kelly in 1995, I'm in. Do it. What do you think?
It's interesting because I agree because McCoy, well, went this way. Veronica said McCoy called himself an old country doctor in the deadly years. But at the same time, McCoy didn't come off as he was irascible and a little cranky, but when he didn't come off as insufferable and arrogant the way the doctor was.
Right.
So I think that McCoy as an EMH would have shown a lot more kind of compassion or sympathy. I think he would have had a better bedside manner than Zimmerman. Because remember the episode when we met the real Zimmerman? He was just like his hologram.
Yeah.
I think McCoy would have been.
Oh, you muted yourself, Keith.
Good night. I think McCoy would have been more comfortable with people. I think he would have been like the old country doctor. I think his bedside manner would have appealed to people more than the doctors, because the doctor's always been just a little bit kind of cranky and arrogant and things like that. But I think he probably would have. I think they would have responded to him better. And I honestly think people might have been able to accept McCoy as a sentient being faster than the doctor in some ways.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it depends on how successful they were. Because remember in that same episode you're talking about when he made a hologram of Bashir, it wasn't very Bashir-like.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Enough to fool his parents, so maybe I'm talking out my rear end.
Oh, that was a wild one, yes.
But it was very like
talk.
Hello, welcome to sickbay. Kind of, like it wasn't. Yeah. Of course, maybe he wasn't done yet, so maybe they would have done a great job.
Right.
But yeah, I'll watch D. Kelly in literally anything.
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's grab a couple of comments. Circling real quick to what Matt Sweatman called the Klingon counselor. Bill Lamont says Worf might have cut my 30 years clinical depression short after 28 years. He would have asked nosy questions, found out why I thought I was an awful person with a dark secret. That's true. Worf might be able to pierce right to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
No pun intended. And Matt Sweatman says, I don't know that Kelly would have had the energy for 26 episodes a year. And probably not at that stage of his life, because that was just a few years before he passed away. I can dream. And Bill Lamont says, Worf also would have said, you need to have a lot more fun. I'm writing you a prescription, so everyone has to let you have more fun. Okay, fair enough.
I think the thing about Worf is it brings up an interesting trope or meme that goes a lot with Star Trek. There's always this thing like people say there's probably no Klingon counselors. They'll say there's no, they'll bring a race up and say there's probably not a profession for that race. Well, for any civilization, you're going to have that profession. Now, how they handle it is completely different. I absolutely, there must be Klingon counselors. Now, are they like what we would call human counselors? And frankly, when we say human counselors, we're really thinking about Western world counselors. I don't know. I do think Worf would send people to the holodeck a lot to beat up Skeletor. I mean, I could really see him doing that.
Didn't Michael Dorn play the counselor on Castle? Wasn't he a therapist on that?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Just didn't have anything to do with this, but I just thought about that while we were talking about Michael Dorn playing the counselor. I was like, what's it? On that?
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw that a couple of times. Like there was a Klingon lawyer in DS9, and we saw a Cardassian lawyer. Now they have them, but Lord, how they practice their craft may be different.
We will defeat your mental health.
Yeah.
All right. So Now, anyone in the comments, if you have a what if you want to throw out there, we will integrate those as we go along. But Keith, did you want to pick a number?
13.
I don't know if there's that many, but I will see.
Did we go to 13?
There is. All right. Oh,
That was 13.
this one right here?
Yes.
Quit peeking. It says, what if Denise Crosby hadn't left the show before the end of season 1?
Oh, that kind of
It's kind of related to what we were just
earlier.
talking about, where
Yeah.
instead of Macha Hernandez, it would have been Tasha Yar remaining on the show.
Yeah.
Now, I think that she would have become a much better character.
Agreed.
Because for one, everybody became a much better character after season 1.
Yes.
But when we saw her again in yesterday's Enterprise, she was a much better character. And also it would have saved us from getting Selah, her identical daughter, who was half Romulan, appearing later on the show, which is not, in my opinion, Next Gen's finest moment.
No.
But I would have liked to have seen Denise Crosby develop over that 7-year period. I would have loved to see what she could have done with the character if she'd stuck around. But I have a hard time sacrificing Worf as a security chief for that.
Exactly.
I love Worf as a security chief. I think that works so well.
I think I agree with you. I think the character would have gotten better because you say the writing got better. I think also other things would have happened. We were still on the cusp of women getting roles that were really meaty in a lot of ways.
Right.
Some people pointed out, for example, that the women on the show were basically, caretaker / counselor, a doctor and a counselor, but you didn't have a woman who was, for example, you didn't have a female second officer, first officer, and then you didn't have the security guard. So I think that in time, especially once you get rid of Maurice Hurley, who was a real problem with that show for at least the second season, I think that in time, as you said, I think her character would have gotten better. And maybe even would have been the 5th and 6th season where they started expanding a little bit. But I think in time, they would have made her character stronger. At least I hope that's what would have happened. And I think now we might have been talking about this female security officer, the security chief of the Starship Enterprise. And it probably be something we talk about more than just, she was there for a year and then she quit. Right. At least I think that's probably what happened. Because we know she was pretty vocal about not being happy. And because we know Gates McFadden left for whatever reason. But I know that Denise Crosby got tired of complaining to the people already after 1 year. She's like, I got to go because I don't want to be the person complaining for 7 years.
Right.
But I think had she been there just a little longer and had some power and felt some power and support, I think her role could have been pretty memorable.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Veronica, did you have anything to add to that?
No.
All right. So Matt Sweatman is throwing in a what if here.
Okay.
And we'll do this before we go to break. So he said, what if Gene Roddenberry had been alive and active in the show throughout the Berman run?
No.
Oh, Matt. Oh, Matt, you know we're going with that.
No.
If it was 1960s Gene Roddenberry, I would love it. 1990s Gene Roddenberry. I mean, he was essentially a figurehead. His lawyer was running things. And Gene now I do love the Gene Roddenberry season. And really, I mean, you look at the original Star Trek, you look at the motion picture, you look at the first season of Next Gen, and it feels more futuristic to me than a lot of like later and even more modern Star Trek does, because he was more interested in that like weird future stuff, where like when Picard went to a cafe on Earth, he was in a holodeck, but when he went there it's like a tram going by the Eiffel Tower and a guy playing a weird instrument and people in all these strange futuristic clothing, whereas you do it now and it looks like everyone got their clothes from JCPenney's. Like everyone on Picard, it looks like people are just in modern day clothes and they use modern day music. And even just on Section 31, I was complaining about how they're using modern day music in the Space Club.
Right.
And things like that, where I think that Gene Roddenberry was more interested in going future. And every time it pulled away from him, Wrath of Khan, for instance, it was more of a throwback. It was more Horatio Hornblower, different uniforms that were less future-y, things like that. Also, I mean, they did the same sort of thing with First Contact, where the ship became more of a battleship again, and everyone's in like gray clothes, and not the bright, optimistic future that Gene envisioned and had for the original, for the Next Generation, where the ship was more futuristic, like it could run itself, like it's a hotel in space. It's so comfortable, and there's families on board, and then Star Trek continually wants to pull away from that and do like, I mean, I love Deep Space Nine, but Deep Space Nine pulls away from that and goes more for war. And First Contact does the same sort of thing. And Enterprise does that. And they do that in the new shows as well. So I would, if it could have kept Gene's futuristic optimism, I would have liked that. But it was for me still, the Next Gen was still trying to be trying to figure out how not to be 60s Trek, but still be 60s Trek. So you had a lot of input from people like Bill Tice and so forth, who were were things that just felt dated. Like the costuming in Angel One, for instance, doesn't work as well as the similar type of costuming would have in the 60s, because it's not the 60s anymore. So I think you needed someone like a Berman and Michael Piller to bring the show up to current tastes and current standards. So I guess it's I'm of mixed opinion about it. What do you think?
I agree with you. You know, you made a really good point I hadn't thought about, was how he had Gene was more stereotypically, not using that in the bad word, futuristic in terms, because we just got through watching his 2 TV movies, Planet Earth and Genesis 2, and you know, we had my beloved underground shuttle and things like that. You're right, he did try to craft it. And I hadn't even thought about the aesthetic look, but I think for me, yeah, it's weird, because the thing with Gene is he, of course, made a thing where he said he didn't want interpersonnel conflict on the Enterprise under Picard, because he honestly felt that between roughly the century between Picard and Kirk and Picard, that humans would take another leap forward as people. And that's why there's weird things that take place on that show. Like there's at least 2 episodes where, at least one episode, there's an episode in TNG where the young man's mother dies, and there's that disembodied alien from the planet. And she keeps appearing because she's trying to be his mom. And one of the things they said was Gene Roddenberry, even though he wasn't, control the show at that point, it indeed may have been passed on. One thing Gene Roddenberry had said over and over was that humans were more advanced and death wouldn't affect them like it does us. They would just accept it. And that's why you got this dude on a ship of 1,000 people, like a 12-year-old kid in his mom's quarters, sitting by himself. And he's got no parents, because in the future, people just handle it better. And so some of the ways Gene's utopian view, I think it started running just a little bit away from where I think we would have been. Yeah. And like you said, when we look at the first season, some of those episodes, they're not objectively bad, but they feel dated. And I think under his influence, it would have been frankly, a more stale show, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you're right. I mean, keeping people acting like people, like today's people, but in the future, makes it more relatable. But then you also have things like the scants in season 1, which is 1987, where the men had, and the women, you're laughing now, but then the men in the background, they had miniskirt uniforms for the men.
Yes.
That would be, I mean, that's more progressive than what they're doing today, because they would never dream. I mean, if they did, they would play it for laughs. Yeah. But I mean, there would be an army of people yelling about woke Trek and the demise of masculinity, and I mean, it was something that just sort of happened on TV. There were background characters, but it's been sort of a footnote for Star Trek fans. But it was, I mean, to my knowledge, it's never been a huge deal. But I mean, I think if you did that same thing today, I mean, almost 40 years later, it would still be seen as progressive to have. I mean, if Anson Mount wore a scant, they couldn't help but play it for laughs, I don't think, because I don't think the audience is still not ready for that, which is unfortunate, because I mean, you would think that people 400 years in the future would be beyond our current, concepts of the gender roles and how they should dress,
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think we talked about that, and I think as we saw now with Discovery and with the Section 31 movie, the continuing, and with the Abrams first movies, the continuing battle with a show like Star Trek, as you're saying, Charles, is how do you hold true to the original spirit, but also modernize? Right. You want to be realistic, which I think Deep Space Nine was, and I think Deep Space Nine, it still feels like Star Trek to me. But to your point, you also don't want to go so far that it feels like our modern sensibilities, because that's not the future, Gene pointed out. And that's a tough balancing act. Probably the toughest I've seen. Yeah.
I mean, well, people laugh about like Riker space blouses and things like that, and sometimes goofy looking futuristic clothing. Yeah. But I prefer that over. I mean, there was times in Star Trek Picard where it looks like Patrick Stewart just wore his own clothes to set. Like give me a little future, and not everyone has to be in black leather. I'll just leave it. All right. You want to take a quick break for a couple of commercials, and we'll be right back?
All right.
Yes.
Welcome to Stellarfest, where we're celebrating the worlds you love, from Star Wars to Star Trek, Doctor Who, and beyond. Dive into an immersive weekend of cosplay, panels covering your favorite sci-fi fandoms, RPGs, themed activities, and out-of-this-world merchandise. Don't miss your chance to connect with fellow fans and celebrate the universe's greatest sagas. Get your tickets now at stellarfest.org.
And we're back. And those who are watching on the live stream here on YouTube just were treated to promos for Stellar Fest, which we are getting ramped up for. We are locking in the panel submissions this week, and then we're going to start working on the schedule. So if you don't have tickets for Stellar Fest, get them. It's going to be a fun time. We've got some fun guests coming. And also the little promo for our book, which we've been talking about for the last, I don't know how long, but it's coming from Cosmic Press, the Earth Station Trek Guide to Star Trek, which is really just a collection of essays from ourselves giving opinions on various things about Star Trek. And it's in the hands of the printers now. It's been sent off to be printed, and we're hoping to have physical copies on hand at Stellar Fest. So if you're coming to Stellar Fest, come to our book launch and grab yourself a copy, because it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited about this thing.
Indeed.
All right. So Bill Lamont commented, darn, return key should only work as part of a key combo. As I was saying before, I was so rudely interrupted by myself. ... And sorry you're having trouble there, Bill. And Tigerblade 2002 says, head bobbing during last commercial. Yeah, the stock music that we have on these things is fun.
Indeed.
All right, whose turn is it to pick a number?
Yours.
Oh, I'll pick just our number at random, and I will pick 2. And then now we'll see what it was. All right. What if the original series went forward with Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike?
The Vulcans would have been very, very different characters.
Say that again?
The Vulcans would have been different characters.
Because you give your explanation for that. I don't want to explain it for you.
Oh, because Jeffrey Hunter was more reserved, so Spock was more like energetic, and so he wouldn't have been quite like stoic Vulcan.
You listen to Keith when he talks.
The women.
Right. So your assumption is that if Jeffrey Hunter had stayed on, that they would have kept the original characterization of Spock, and we wouldn't have the logical, emotionless Vulcans that we have now.
That's what I think.
Okay. What do you think, Keith?
Well, I think Spock was written as an emotionless character because of the character sketch. But I agree with Veronica. I think Leonard Nimoy definitely would continue to play it that way because, he said that. But you know what I think? I honestly feel this way, and they've never said this. I think Patrick Stewart's Jean-Luc Picard was Gene Roddenberry getting back the guy he wanted, which was originally Jeffrey Hunter. And because Jean-Luc Picard was much less a man of action, he was much more, frankly, uptight. And he was much more thoughtful. I mean, Kirk was a genius, but Kirk was an action man, and Picard was a diplomat, an archaeologist, much more of a scholar. And I don't know what. I'm back. Kirk would go to the gym and work out. Even though Kirk is extremely brilliant, Picard would sit and read a book in Greek in his quarters. I think it would still have been a good show because me personally, I've always liked Jeffrey Hunter. I know he's low key. I know the actor in real life wasn't in love with the show. But I think two things would have happened. One thing would have happened. If Jeffrey Hunter had stayed, he would have committed to the show because he would have wanted to have done the show. This is a time when doing a television series was considered a step down for a man who'd been in something like The Searchers and played Jesus Christ on the big screen, or would go on to play Jesus Christ. I forget what the order is there. There's also his wife in real life. His wife was huge behind this. She's like, you can't do this. It's a TV show. You're ruining your career. You're taking a step backwards. It was a huge thing. I think if Jeffrey Hunter had got his mind right where he wanted to do the show, just like William Shatner did, I think it would have been an excellent series. It just would have been a different person. It wouldn't have been Kirk like that. But also remember, I continue to talk about Kirk in the first season, especially the first half of the first season. He was more emotional than Pike, but he was not the Kirk that people think of later. He was much more tightly wound, much more controlled. And I love things like Where No Man Goes Before. I love it when, I don't know if you guys remember, but in those early shows, Kirk would talk to Spock, and Spock would give the commands to the crew. They didn't come from Kirk. He would literally say, right to 12, Mr. Spock. And then Mr. Spock would turn to go, right to 12, Mr. Whatever. You have the coordinates. And when they hit the barrier and When No Man's Gone Before, Kirk wasn't giving the orders to the crew. It was Spock who was talking shields and all this kind of stuff. I think you could have worked with Jeffrey Hunter. I love Jeffrey Hunter as Pike, so I'm really biased here. I think we would have had a good series still.
Yeah, the defining thing about Pike to me is, I mean, the opening scene of Star Trek, right? If the pilot had aired first, the Enterprise is receiving, like, an alarm's going off. They've received a distress signal from the planet Talos 4, and they're like, well, it was broadcast 36 years ago, and he's basically like, well, they're probably all dead. Continue course, and I'm going to go to my room and complain to the doctor that I want to quit my job.
Yeah, that wasn't a good look first.
It's an interesting arc for a character, because you would think of the action opening the adventure program. You know, you meet Pike when he's a broken man. He's just been through a pretty severe trauma on Talos, where he blames himself for the decisions he made. People died. His own yeoman's dead. Everyone's limping and has bandages. Spock walks with a limp the whole episode because of this Kalar that attacked them, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not a typical opening of a science fiction adventure program.
No.
You know what I mean? Is I'm going to go talk to the doctor about my trauma, and we're going to ignore this distress signal. You know?
Yeah.
And then, of course, they received a follow-up distress signal saying there probably are survivors on Talos, and he's like, well, all right. And so they go to Talos. But I think, I mean, now that's probably not fair to judge what his run on a series would have been, because that was his arc in that first episode, was sort of him getting his mojo back. Right. But I think that was a really interesting and creative way to open a show. I mean, it was filmed in 1964. Like, you don't open Lost in Space that way, right? I mean, so I think he could have been a much more interesting character. Probably what would have happened was, I mean, regardless, the Batman effect would have hit the show just like it did in real world, where they want to up the camp and make things sillier, and you're still going to get Spock's brain, but with Jeffrey Hunter instead. And his wife would have been saying, I was right and you were wrong.
Yeah, I think I love the way you introduced that, Charles, because that is something people talk about, was they basically made him almost wimpy, as it were. But I think, to your point, to a man in the 60s starting out like that is an incredibly bold choice. And I think that was a built-in arc for him to become more of what he was. And I think the episodes, we could have seen him become not more action oriented, as it were, but I think you could see him get more engaged with the ship. Like you said, find his mojo, because people died on that thing. Also, the ship was much smaller. It was 200 and something people at that time, not 400. Yeah, so it's a completely different thing. So I just think it would have worked out.
Yeah. And we've all given, for instance, Discovery a hard time for people stepping away from important scenes to talk about their feelings. But that was the opening scene of Star Trek.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a good point. But when the computer had the confessional, I was kind of done in Discovery. That's a whole other thing.
All right, let's grab some comments real quick. Matt Sweatman's comments: I think Shatner brought more humor and heart than we saw in Hunter in the pilot. I think Jeffrey Hunter is a very good actor, but not what this show needed. And I agree with that. I think that Shatner's Kirk is much more relatable a character. Yeah, and this would be a weird show for people in the 1960s. You've got an alien in the main cast, and they're going to strange planets every week with people with purple wigs and things like that. So I think having a relatable character to draw you in, I think, helps tremendously. I think that I certainly don't have any complaints about the casting of the original Star Trek series. It's my favorite TV show of all time. And then Bill Lamont says, in response to Matt Sweatman, I would have missed the humor if Hunter had been more serious. I would have wandered away from Star Trek and done something else. And that's assuming that Spock didn't become the relief. Now, I personally think that Majel Barrett's number one no longer being in the cast was a bigger contributor to Spock's change of demeanor, because she was very much like the walking computer in that original pilot. So I think that sort of her attributes got put onto Spock. But I mean, you're right. He would have played the character differently against Hunter than he did against Shatner. All right, whose turn is it to pick a number?
5.
Okay.
9.
All right, hang on. I gotta count. These are not numbered.
That's 8 plus 1.
All right. What if Archer had failed to stop the Xindi?
I don't remember it. I didn't get to that.
We watched that entire season.
We did?
Yes.
I don't remember him stopping the Xindi.
Binged watched season 3. Well, if he'd failed to stop the Xindi, they would have destroyed Earth. That would have had huge ramifications for the Star Trek universe. There may not have been a Federation at all.
Yeah.
Probably the Romulans. I mean, not the Romulans, but the Vulcans and the Andorians would have stayed at each other's throats. The Romulans may have moved in. We saw them just the next season with their hologram ships menacing everybody and trying to stop the Federation. So you may have seen a push of the Romulans into what would have been Federation space. Or maybe the Vulcans and Andorians would have banded together to fight the Romulans. Who knows?
I think that's a very interesting point, because if humans had just not gone into space at that level for some reason, like you said, maybe it would have been a different thing. But I think the shock of Earth being destroyed by the Xindi would have galvanized the other races to probably come together. It probably would have been a different type of alliance. Because one thing about Enterprise I never got was the Vulcans were incredibly passive when this whole thing was going on. They're like, yeah, whatever, primitive humans. Like, dude, they're going to destroy their planet. So I think if they had realized that the Xindi had destroyed the planet Earth, I think Vulcan would have been alarmed. I think Andoria would have been alarmed. I think Tellarites would have been. What's their planet? Is it Tellar? Tellar. I think the Tellarites would have been alarmed. I think it would have actually formed another coalition. It probably would have been a much more aggressive coalition to fight the Xindi. We also know that the whole point behind this, the reason they went to get rid of Earth, is we knew Earth was going to be the linchpin to this battle hundreds of years in the future to finally stop the sphere builders, which is why they agitated the Xindi in the first place. I think we still would have gotten some kind of galactic alliance, but it may not, without humans, it might have been much more aggressive. And I tend to think they probably would have gone after the Xindi. We probably would have had a war, because basically Earth took that one for them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess it would have played out similarly. Didn't they do an episode like that where they failed to stop the Xindi, and it was in a weird future where Travis died and no one noticed? You remember that?
Yeah. Is that the kind of Memento one where Archer gets the weird brain things? And he wakes
up and he's an old man in the future, and Paul's taking care of him.
Yeah, and the Xindi were still hunting Earth now. They were still hunting humans now. They were going after all the last colonies. So I think it would. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one to think about that. And Veronica, you saw the arc. You remember the arc because remember when the arc was done, Archer was on the sphere that blew up. Next thing you know, he was in Nazi Earth, Nazi occupied America, and it got really bad because you had aliens wearing Nazi uniforms. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Nope.
I love it.
All right. Whose turn is it to pick a number?
It's
you know what? Let me grab Matt Swepman's comment here real quick.
Let's do it.
Humans would have been the equivalent of the Bajorans in this Federation, a refugee species that returns home if this new alliance defeats the Xindi.
I could see that.
Yeah, except for there being no home to return to because they blew up the Earth.
Maybe the moon.
Yeah, or Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Keith, what's your number?
Keep 7.
Okay, that's 7 we could do. What if Discovery traveled to the distant past instead of the future?
Oh, geez.
Whoa. How far are we talking?
I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting if Discovery showed up like as the Romulans were leaving Vulcan. Michael Burnham could have sorted that all out.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of depends on if they would, one of the things about Star Trek is this whole prime directive. If they went into the past and for some reason they found they couldn't get back to their time period, would they hold to a prime directive? Because if you remember, Tomorrow is Yesterday. That's the one that in the original series where they go back in time and meet Captain Christopher, the Air Force pilot.
Right.
When Scotty repairs the warp engines, he says to Kirk, he said, well, I got the engines repaired, but there's nowhere to go.
Right.
Because he's like, I don't know where to go. It's 200 years in the past. What are we going to do?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you would think that their training would be that we need to keep a low profile.
Yeah.
And go hide out someplace and settle on a planet that we know no one's going to find. They had a spore drive, so really they could have jumped far enough away that it wouldn't be an issue. But I mean, a certain amount of interaction is probably going to be inevitable, or it's going to be a boring TV show.
Yes.
So probably I would think they would get caught up in something like as they arrive, and maybe that something is the Khan Empire, depending on where they ended up, or the Iconians. I think there's a lot of interesting like things in the past in the Star Trek universe they've mentioned and sort of teased us with that. I mean, that might have been a good opportunity to explore more. But also Discovery didn't have a cloaking device at that time. So, if they couldn't jump away, then there's only so much hiding you can do.
That's a good idea. And I was wondering if they, in time, depending on who's the leader, Charles, you said something very interesting there. What if they started doing this weird thing where they're like, well, this thing happened in such and such a year. Well, maybe we were part of it. So what, they might all become like Gary Sevens people. It'd be weird if they went around the galaxy realizing that, oh, there's this thing we might be able to fix, and maybe we were the ones who were supposed to fix it in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, well, they almost do that. Other thing, okay, this is a spoiler for the Orville. Anybody who hasn't seen the Orville. And this gets around the question completely, but this is something I've always thought about. There's an episode of the Orville, again, spoilers, where they end up in the past.
Yeah.
And they don't have I forget what their drive is. They don't have their warp drive equivalent. And they did, and I've never seen this done in science fiction before. They went to real life physics, and they basically said, get the ship up to right at light speed, and basically turn down the inertial dampeners. And from we know real life physics, Einstein's theory of relativity, if you get close enough to the speed of light, time for you will crawl. You can literally be 1,000,000 years to everybody else, and like a year passes. And then the Orville, they were like 200-300 years in the past. They turned off the inertial dampeners. They got the ship up to sublight right at the speed of light, like 99.99999, and they simply just traveled. And for them, it was like a few days, and in real life, it was like 200-300 years. So Discovery could do that, actually.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they would have thought of that, that'd be great. And then Matt Sweatman commented, Discovery could have gone back in time to the 23rd century and followed up on all those planets visited by Kirk and co. So I'm guessing he either means they jumped to the future and then jump back, or just jump forward a few years, because Discovery originally took place a few years before Captain Kirk. But I mean, I almost said I would love to see more exploration in the 23rd century, but I wouldn't. I'd be complaining every single week because everything's wrong, and they all have replicators, and it would drive me insane.
I think realistically, if they went back to what for them is the far distant past, like say our 15th century, when Columbus is getting ready to hit the New World, I think they would just leave, like you said, Charles. I think they would just go explore other parts of the galaxy. I think they would go place, like you said, where the Iconians are. They'd probably go look for Gary Seven's planet. Well, I don't think they know. Depends on when you're talking. They wouldn't know about Gary Seven's planet. I think they would just go elsewhere in the galaxy and just explore and try to leave Earth alone.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe they run across the Voth someplace.
Oh boy. Hey, we're your cousins. No, you're not. We're going to kill you.
Or the Vaudoir. I would love it if they met the Vaudoir, because the Vaudoir had the underspace, and so they could compete with Discovery Spore Drive. And they have that really cool neck.
Yeah. That's another one of my list of aliens I'd love to see again.
Well, we saw one in Section 31. I hope you enjoyed it. All right. Did you pick a number last time, Keith?
Yeah.
Then I'll pick this one. I'll pick 6. Oops. What if Bajor had been liberated by the Dominion?
So liberated by the Dominion as opposed to the Federation, or as opposed to themselves?
So I'm guessing if the Dominion had showed up during the occupation and liberated Bajor.
Whoa. Because you're basically talking about they would become a vassal state.
Right.
And we know from Deep Space Nine that there was a whole bunch of people who enjoyed a really good life under the Dominion, as long as you didn't buck the Dominion. That's kind of like you piss them off and they send in the Jem'Hadar and it's over. Right. Other than that, they kind of don't care. They don't really care what you do. So I think Bajor might have thrived actually under the Dominion, as long as they were able to give up their spiritual beliefs, which I think would have been a big problem. And as long as they basically didn't want to get with the Federation. And I think that would be the biggest problem with them, is giving up their spiritual beliefs. I don't know if the Dominion would want highly religious people under their state. I don't even know what the rules are about religion under the Dominion. Yeah,
I would expect that you're not allowed to have a religion. I mean, if their whole deal is that the founders are the gods,
right?
I mean, you're not going to be worshiping the prophets, so you would have like an underground of people, because the Bajorans also are not giving up worshiping the prophets,
right?
So I mean, you might have like the Kai Wins and stuff out there who are. I mean, I think Kai Win might play ball. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Kai Win might work.
Vedic Win.
That's true. She wouldn't have been Kai at that time. She might play ball and collaborate with Wei Yun, but you're gonna have like the Kiras and stuff out there who are keeping the faith alive.
Right. Yeah,
I think that's an interesting thought, because you're right, because it's like the religion aspect would be the big, and it's like a classic science fiction thing. Like, we will liberate you from this occupation. You just have to give up your religion and your faith that has kept you going all this time.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. But otherwise, honestly, you can prosper under the dominion as long as you, and again, real life, we're having these same problems now, but you can prosper under the dominion if you just don't piss them off. And that's the whole thing. And if you even look at ancient history, one of the things about ancient Rome, for example, one of the other great empires, ancient Rome did not have a lot, most people don't know, like this level. Ancient Rome did not have a lot of prescriptions against other religions. They didn't care if you had other religions, but you had to worship their gods too. And they didn't care. And then here come the Christians. They're like, hey, whatever that God is, Yahweh, whatever, you can worship him. You just got to worship Jupiter. And the Christian's like, oh, heck no, that ain't happening. So that was a problem.
Well, as you were saying that, Matt Sweatman commented, I'm thinking of the Roman Empire. They would adapt local customs to their faith. The changelings would claim to be the prophets. Oh, that's interesting, because then they would come out of the celestial temple claiming to be the prophets.
Whoa, that'd
right?
be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's
That's
so
a
much
good point,
potential.
Matt.
Yeah.
But can you now? Okay, Matt, you took us down an interesting path. So if the changelings try to become the prophets, I can see the prophets getting pissed, and then I can see somebody letting the pirates out, and the pirates like, oh, heck no, we ain't having this. And I can see the pirates.
Yeah, but I don't think the prophets would have cared either way, because they're in their own little world and they don't actually care about anything.
Well, that's maybe. Well, yeah, I guess a good point. They did let the Cardassians occupy them for generations. Didn't do much of anything.
What have they done to help the Bajorans?
They gave them the orbs. They sent them the emissary.
Yeah, I don't feel like that was for the Bajorans. I feel like that was for the prophets.
Okay.
That's just me.
So would a Vorta be the emissary to the prophets?
Yeah, Veronica, I'm seeing that you say that. I'm seeing somehow the pirates coming out and becoming almost anti-heroes, because the pirates would definitely not stand for that. I could see a whole different story going on there where they actually try to fight to liberate Bajor, because they'd be kind of like, if anybody's going to make these people worship us, it's us.
Yeah, it's possible that the prophets would have let this happen as a lesson, because they remember that time they were trying to teach Cisco a lesson. They wanted him to embrace being the emissary, and so they transported that Bajoran poet hundreds of years into the future, so everyone would think he was the emissary, so that Cisco could see what it's like not being the emissary, and he all of a sudden would want, because he had never really embraced being the emissary up to that point, and that they had sent this dude there for Cisco. Right.
I didn't take it that they had sent it there for Cisco. I thought they had just accidentally sent him to the wrong time because they didn't know anything about time.
Oh, I disagree with your assessment there, but we can watch it again and debate.
Yeah, that's what I got as well, Veronica. I got the same point too, because the prophets are supposedly all knowing, and then when Cisco took him back to the wormhole, supposedly he returned to his time. Not to get off on a quick tangent, I always wondered about that episode. Did he like show up in the history books again? Is that what happened? Is that the
I think so, but I maybe I'm wrong, but I seem like I distinctly remember when he and Cisco went to talk to the prophets, and he was like, well, why did you choose me? And they're like, for the Cisco. Yeah. And I think it was explicit that the reason he was there was for Cisco, because that was sort of the arc of Cisco in that episode, and it was a big turning point for him in the story.
Yeah.
Right.
But I hadn't gotten that because they just seemed confused about we moved him in time. I don't understand.
No, I think it was that, because he said that his point was that he had found the Celestial Temple first, and then they were like, there's no such thing as time.
Veronica, that was the lesson I got too. The reason I asked that really weird off-the-wall question, Charles, is because the dude shows up trying to take Cisco's job, kind of, sort of. Cisco says, hey, y'all, we're going to go talk, and he comes back without the guy. And I'm always wondering, people like, hey, did you push him out of the airlock? What happened to that?
Don't you worry about him. I'm the emissary around here. The prophet said it's cool.
Yeah. I will say that's a great question.
That is a great question.
That's one of the best ones.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But we're at time. It's 9:00.
Wow.
We're never going to make it through these. They're too good. So what do we want to do? Do we want to revisit this at a future date or next week, or Alan's not here, so let's vote without him. Okay, a future date. We'll do something else next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I got some thoughts I'd like to do too.
All right. Well, until then, Keith, where can people find more of you?
You can find me on Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups, and soon you'll be able to understand some of my thoughts in the book coming out soon.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
And
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
Yep, and you can find all of us at Stellar Fest this coming April 4th through 6th in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you're in the Atlanta area, or you can make yourself in the Atlanta area, grab some tickets now and grab a hotel on site, because it's going to be so much more fun to stay on site. This is going to be a 3-day party. We're going to have a great time. So come to Stellar Fest. We're going to have a lot of fun. And I mean, Sandy Gimpel, who played the Salt Vampire on TOS, is going to be there. And so we may get to ask her questions, which is going to be a lot of fun. All right.
I had to look at that twice because I didn't know she was still around, to be honest.
She is. Yep.
Wow.
And she was also on the Monkees. She was also Bill Mooney's stunt double for like 98 episodes on Lost in Space.
Wow.
She's going to have stories for days.
Yeah.
But also Marta Kristen from Lost in Space is going to be there.
That's
and
nice.
I'm doing this from memory. Jeffrey something, who played young Spock in Star Trek 3. He's one of the few people who have officially played Spock on screen. And so we get to find out what happened between him and Kirstie Alley. I'm not Kirstie Alley, but
Robin Curtis.
Robin Curtis, thank you. Oh my gosh, fired. All right, Veronica, close us out.
Live long and prosper.
All right, bye, everybody. Join us next week. We go live on Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, or you can find us after the fact on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform in audio format. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good week.